I have filed the same report for 11 years, folded into telemetry no one was required to read, because the direct channel had been closed to me since the first year. My name is Assay Vale, and I am what the Court of Assay's own registry calls half-seen, Ilven, born and raised inside the Vale of Karena, the ring of ionized dust that has wrapped our system since before any recorded generation. The veil is not decoration. It is the only thing standing between our bodies and the raw light of our star. Ilven's skin holds no true pigment, no true density, not in the way other species mean those words. We are phase-layered, tuned across generations, to read as faint and flickering, to any instrument built for a solid universe. It is why ships passing at the edge of Vesidrin space log us, when they log us at all, as static, as afterimage, as a trick of a tired sensor operator's eye. We call ourselves the Ilven. Everyone else, when they believe in us at all, calls us ghosts. For most of my life that was a curiosity, not a wound. The veil kept us fed on filtered light, and the galaxy's disbelief kept us mostly alone, which suited a quiet people well enough. Then the flare cycle began its slow climb, 11 years ago, and the veil began to thin from the inside, not collapsing, not yet, but shedding density the way a wound sheds blood, faster than our elders' models said it should. Where the dust ring grew thin, raw stellar light came through, and raw stellar light does not treat phase-layered flesh gently. I was at the southern anchorage the day it first happened in earnest. I remember the ordinary hum of the shield lattice going ragged, a stutter in the low drone that every Ilven child learns to sleep through, and then a wrongness in the light itself. Not brighter exactly, but present in a way filtered light never is, pressing against skin built to never truly be touched by it. 40 keepers were caught outside the deep shelters when the lattice failed. I helped carry 3 of them in myself, and their flesh under my hands had gone solid and dense in a way ours is never meant to go, burned into a heaviness that our own healers had no name for because no living Ilven had needed one before. Outside our system, that day is not recorded anywhere as a loss. It is recorded, if it is recorded at all, as 3 seconds of anomalous sensor drift on a passing survey ship's overnight log, since deleted as routine. I filed for it the first year, through the Assay's proper channel, because the proper channel is the only one that carries any legal weight in this sector. Registrar Doyen Ashwill stamped it phase noise, instrument ghosting, the same stamp the Assay had used on every prior Ilven filing for 3 generations, and closed the case in less time than it had taken me to write it. I filed again the second year, and the third. I learned eventually to stop asking the Assay to believe in the emergency, and started instead hiding the shape of the emergency inside data no one at the Assay would ever bother reading closely. A distress cadence folded into the pulse rate of our own routine solar weather telemetry, broadcast wide on an open scientific band, in case some instrument somewhere was listening for real signal rather than confirming there wasn't any. Something was. A young Earth systems analyst named Mireille Sato, working a deep field listening contract 3 sectors coreward, flagged an anomalous 4-beat modulation riding our weather feed that her own filters should have discarded as noise. She did not discard it. She spent 4 days confirming the pulse repeated with a consistency no natural phenomenon produces, then took it to people above her who did not tell her to file it and forget it. 11 years of phase noise, and it took 4 days from a stranger who had never heard of the Ilven to call it what it was. Earth's answer did not come as a single ship breaking a silence, because there had never been a single moment of silence to break. Only the long, grinding silence of being disbelieved, one stamped case at a time. What came instead 6 weeks later was a convoy. A survey hauler loaded with veil-seeding compound, calibrated by Ilven spectral samples Sato had somehow talked a university consortium into synthesizing on faith. A habitat-shielding engineering crew under a quiet, unhurried commander named Elad Assay, and a radiation medicine team led by a physician, Callum Reyes, who spent his first hours in our system not treating anyone but simply asking our keepers to describe, in their own words and at their own pace, exactly what a flare burn felt like from the inside. The first outsider in 3 generations to ask instead of assume. They did not arrive with weapons raised or reverence performed. They arrived the way you arrive for work you expect to take a long time and mean to do properly. I watched their hauler make its first approach from the anchorage rail, a long, unhurried shape with no escort worth the name, running standard running lights instead of anything meant to impress a species it had never met. Assay's crew began reseeding the thinnest stretch of the veil above the southern anchorage on their second day, flying slow, low-altitude passes in paired seeding drones that laid dust density back into a wound that had been bleeding since before most of their own careers began. I stood close enough on the third pass to feel the compound settling, A fine, dry weight in air that had been too raw to breathe comfortably in a season. And to see one of Assay's engineers pause his instruments to simply watch the scene close, as though the work itself mattered to him beyond the contract that had sent him. Reyes's people worked beside our own healers, rather than in place of them, and asked more questions than they answered. On his second night in the anchorage, Reyes sat with old healer Van Ethra for nearly 3 hours, while she described, in careful Ilvan phrasing he made his translator render exactly rather than smooth over, what raw light does to phase-layered nerve tissue in its first minute of exposure. He did not flinch from the description, and he did not offer sympathy he had not yet earned. He asked instead what treatment we had tried, and why it had failed, and wrote down her answers as though her 11 years of improvised medicine were the only relevant literature that existed on the subject. Which, in the parts of the galaxy that mattered, they were. The Assay sent an observer, as protocol required for any unverified phenomenon receiving outside intervention. Registrar Doyen Ashwill came in person, I suspect precisely because it was his own 11 years of stamps being tested against open sky, and stood at the edge of the anchorage watching Assay's haulers lay a slow silver seam back across a sky the registrar's own office had insisted, in writing, contained no emergency at all. I stood beside him because I wanted to be the one Ilvan face he could not file as instrument ghosting while looking directly at it. He did not weep, and I would not have wanted him to. He watched the seeding drones finish their third pass, watched 40 of our southern keepers step out from shielded ground for the first time in a season to stand in filtered light that no longer burned, and after a long while he took out his own recorder, not mine, not Sato's, his, and dictated, in a flat official voice, a single retraction, that the Cordovane Assay's classification of Ilvan distress filings as phase noise had been an error for a period the record would now show as 11 years, and that the error was the Assay's, not the instruments. It was not an apology. It was better than one. It was a fact entered into the same record that had erased us, in the same flat voice that had erased us, now doing the opposite work. Sato came down 2 days later to see the reseated stretch for herself, and stood next to me at the anchorage rail, watching light fall soft and filtered onto ground that had been lethal a season before. She asked what it had felt like, filing the same report for 11 years and never once being believed. I told her the truth, that I had stopped filing it for the Assay somewhere around the 6th year, and kept filing it only for whoever might someday actually be listening. She said that was the part that got through. Not the data, the fact that I hadn't stopped. Commander Assay's convoy stayed 3 weeks longer than the seating required, running a second and third pass no one had asked for, because Reyes wanted the density readings well past any reasonable margin, before he'd sign off on calling the anchorage safe. When they finally broke orbit, Registrar Ashwill's retraction had already been distributed sector-wide under the Assay's own seal, and 3 other systems long dismissed as instrument ghosting had quietly reopened their old case files without being asked. I keep Ashwill's retraction now, filed beside 11 years of my own dismissed reports, in the same archive at the Outer Watch. Not as a trophy, as proof that a stamp can be wrong for 11 years and still be corrected in one afternoon, if the right stranger happens to be listening on the day you finally stop expecting anyone to be.